In the heart of ancient Central Asia, where winds swept across vast steppes and mountains, sliced the sky like blades, a warrior queen wrote her name in history with blood, not just any blood, but that of the most powerful man in the known world. This is the story of Tomyris, queen of the Massagetae, and how she orchestrated a vengeance so terrible against Cyrus the Great that his name would be feared for generations. To understand this tale of revenge, we must first understand who Cyrus was. In the 6th century BCE, while Rome was still an insignificant city-state, and Athens was experimenting with democracy, a colossal empire was rising in the east. The Persian Empire, under Cyrus II, stretched from the Mediterranean to the Hindu Kush, from the Caucasus to the Persian Gulf. Never before had humanity witnessed an empire of such magnitude ruled by a single man. Cyrus wasn't merely a conqueror, he was a revolutionary in the art of governance. Unlike the brutal tyrants who preceded him, he allowed conquered peoples to maintain their religions, customs, and, in many cases, their local leaders. When he took Babylon, he didn't massacre its inhabitants, but freed the Jews from their captivity. His Cyrus Cylinder, a decree inscribed in clay, is considered by many to be history's first human rights document. But make no mistake, his benevolence was calculated. Respect for local cultures ensured stability across his vast empire, and the image of liberator masked limitless ambition. Cyrus the Great, as he would be called, had no intention of stopping. Each conquest only fueled his desire for more territory, more power, more glory. In 530 BCE, after subjugating kingdoms that had existed for millennia, his eyes turned northward, beyond the Jaxartes River, known today as the Cyrenaica. There, in the plains of Central Asia, lived a nomadic people called the Massagetae, fierce warriors who lived in harmony with the unforgiving nature of the steppes. The Massagetae knew neither walls nor cities. The sky was their roof, the horizon their limit. And ruling them was a widowed queen whose name would make Cyrus regret his ambitions, Tomyris. We know little about Tomyris's early years. Historical accounts, mostly written by men, rarely concerned themselves with details of women's lives, even queens. What we do know is that when she ascended to the throne after her husband's death, she quickly proved herself a formidable leader. Unlike many queen consorts who served only as temporary regents, Tomyris personally commanded her armies and was respected by her people, not by birth or marriage, but by merit. When Persian emissaries arrived at the queen's nomadic court, Cyrus's intentions were presented under the guise of diplomacy. The great king proposed marriage to Tomyris. To any outside observer, it would be a sensible political union. She would maintain her position as queen, now of a Persian province, and her people would be incorporated into the empire without bloodshed. Tomyris, however, was not a woman easily deceived. She saw through the proposal to what it truly was, not a marriage request, but an attempt at conquest without battle. Her response was clear and firm. The Massagetae would remain free, and she would be neither wife nor subject to the Persian king. The rejection struck Cyrus like an unbearable insult. The man who had subjugated entire nations would not accept being refused by a barbarian queen of a nomadic people. If he couldn't have the Massagetae through diplomacy, he would have them by force. He ordered his generals to gather a massive army to march beyond the Jaxartes into Tomyris's lands. When news of the war preparations reached the queen, she sent a messenger to Cyrus, king of the Persians, "Abandon your enterprise, for you cannot know if in the end it will bring you benefit. Rule your people and tolerate seeing me rule mine. But I know you will not accept this counsel, for you are incapable of living in peace." Tomyris's prophetic words were ignored. Cyrus advanced with his army northward, building bridges across the Jaxartes to invade Massagetae territory. The queen, demonstrating strategic wisdom, did not attempt to prevent his initial advance. She allowed the Persians to cross the river, entering territory she knew like the back of her hand, but which, for them, was strange and hostile. It was then that Cyrus committed his first fatal error, an error born of arrogance and disregard for his adversary. Following the advice of Croesus, the former king of Lydia, who now served as his advisor, he devised a plan that exploited what he considered to be the weakness of the Massagedae, their love for wine, a beverage unknown in their culture. The Persian army established a camp with minimal provisions and low-ranking soldiers, leaving behind an abundance of wine and food, then simulating a retreat. Cyrus waited for the nomads to attack the unprotected camp. The plan initially worked. A detachment of Massagedae, led by Spargapises, Tomyris' son, discovered the camp, defeated the small garrison, and, having no experience with alcoholic beverages, became intoxicated with the wine left behind. In the dead of night, when alcohol had overcome the nomadic warriors, Cyrus attacked. The Massagedae, unable to fight in their state, were easily defeated. Many were killed, others captured, including young Spargapises, the queen's son. Upon awakening and realizing what had happened, how he had betrayed his people through his naivety, Spargapises begged to be freed from his chains. When his request was granted, in an act of desperation and honor, he took his own life. The news of her son's death struck Tomyris like lightning. Her grief, however, did not paralyze her. It transformed into an icy fury, calculating and implacable. She sent a second messenger to Cyrus, with words that should have made the conqueror reconsider his campaign. "Bloodthirsty man, do not pride yourself on what you have done. It was with wine, that poison with which you fill yourselves to madness, that you conquered my son, not in fair combat. Now hear my words well. Leave these lands and return to your empire, forgiving the injury of capturing 1/3 of my army through trickery. If you refuse, I swear by the sun, Lord of the Massagedae, that I will quench your thirst for blood, insatiable though it may be." Cyrus, intoxicated not with wine, but with his own legend, ignored the warning. The man who had conquered Babylon, defeated the kingdom of Lydia, and subjugated Egypt would not retreat before a savage woman of the steppes. This would be just another conquest in his unstoppable ascent to glory. What followed entered history as one of the greatest military defeats ever suffered by an expanding empire. Tomyris gathered all the Massagedae tribes under her command. Mounted warriors, accustomed to the harsh life of the steppes, who could ride for days without stopping and hit a target with an arrow from hundreds of yards away, converged to face the invader. The battle that followed was bloody and decisive. The Persians, with their heavy infantry and tactics developed for siege warfare or the open fields of Mesopotamia, found themselves at a disadvantage in the open plains, where the mobility of Massagedae horsemen could be fully exploited. Mounted archers would attack and withdraw before the Persians could effectively counterattack. Cyrus fought with the bravery that had made him legendary, leading personal charges against enemy lines. But even the greatest conqueror the world had ever known could not overcome the combination of hostile territory, a tactically superior enemy, and the fury of a mother seeking vengeance for her dead son. In the heat of battle, the unimaginable happened. Cyrus the Great fell. The man who had built the largest empire the world had ever seen, whose name made kings tremble, was defeated and killed in the plains beyond the Jaxartes. It was what happened after his death, however, that ensured this story would be told and retold for centuries. According to Herodotus, the first great historian of the Western world, Tomyris ordered her men to search for Cyrus's body among the dead. When they found it, she commanded that his head be cut off and brought to her. What followed was an act as symbolic as it was terrible. Tomyris took a wineskin, a container made of animal skin used to store liquids, and ordered it to be filled with human blood. Then, grasping the decapitated head of Cyrus by the hair, she plunged it into the blood, proclaiming, "I live and have conquered you in battle, but you have destroyed me by taking my son through trickery." Now, as I promised, I shall quench your thirst for blood." This act of brutal vengeance, dipping Cyrus's head in blood, was not mere gratuitous cruelty. It was a powerful symbol, a declaration to the world and to history. Even the mightiest of men, if driven by boundless ambition, will meet their end. The conqueror who had spilled the blood of so many peoples now had his own blood, or at least his head, bathed in the blood of his victims. Here, we must pause to question how historical this narrative is. Like many events of antiquity, the story comes to us primarily through Herodotus, who wrote some 75 years after the events, basing his account on oral reports. We know with certainty that Cyrus died in a campaign against a northern nomadic people. Later Persian inscriptions mention that he was buried in Pasargadae, his capital, indicating that his body was recovered, partially contradicting the account of the decapitation. Modern archaeologists and historians debate the exact details. Some suggest that Tomyris's story might have been amplified by the Greeks, who had an interest in portraying the Persians, their enemies, as defeated by barbarian peoples. Others point out that the idea of a great conqueror defeated by a woman served as a moral narrative about the dangers of hubris. Nevertheless, archaeological evidence confirms the existence of the Massagetae as a powerful confederation of nomadic tribes, and multiple sources beyond Herodotus mention Tomyris and her victory over Cyrus. The Roman historian Justin, for example, describes her as fighting not as a woman defending her freedom, but as a queen avenging her realm. The consequences of Cyrus's death were profound. His son, Cambyses II, inherited the vast empire, but not his father's political genius. Obsessed with the conquest of Egypt, which Cyrus had initiated, Cambyses neglected internal stability. After his death, a civil war erupted until Darius I restored order and expanded the empire even further. Asc. For Tomyris, her fate after the great victory is uncertain. Historical records, so focused on male kings and generals, rarely followed the stories of women, even those who defeated the greatest conquerors. Some traditions say she ruled for many years in peace, having secured her people's safety by establishing that not even the greatest empire would dare attack them again. Others suggest she was eventually defeated by rival tribes. What remains incontestable is the legacy of her victory. In a world where women were systematically erased from narratives of power, Tomyris accomplished something extraordinary. She ensured her name would be remembered, not as the wife or mother of some great man, but as a warrior queen who defeated the most powerful conqueror of her era. Tomyris's story also offers us a powerful lens through which we can examine how genuine power often transcends limitations imposed by gender, race, or social origin. In an age when women rarely had a voice in matters of state, a barbarian queen of a nomadic people demonstrated strategic capability and military leadership superior to that of the ruler of the greatest empire the world had ever known. The contrast between Cyrus and Tomyris also represents the eternal conflict between sedentary civilizations and nomadic peoples. The Persian Empire, with its cities, roads, and irrigation systems, represented what the Greeks considered civilization. The Massagetae, with their tents, horses, and life in perpetual movement, represented what Persians and Greeks called barbarism. Yet, it was the barbarian who prevailed over the civilized, a pattern that would repeat throughout history, from the Huns against Rome to the Mongols against China. The final image, Cyrus's head immersed in blood, remains one of the most powerful metaphors in ancient history. It is a graphic reminder that even the mightiest empires find their limits, that unbridled ambition often leads to destruction, and that sometimes the most fitting vengeance is that which poetically reflects the original crime. Tomyris didn't just defeat Cyrus, she transformed him into a symbol. The head of the conqueror, bathed in the blood he so coveted, became a warning to all future emperors, kings, and tyrants. The thirst for power, territory, and glory is insatiable, and those who seek to quench such thirst often meet an end as bloody as their ambitions. When we think of great conquerors of antiquity, names like Alexander, Caesar, and Genghis Khan come to mind. We rarely remember Tomyris. Yet her victory against Cyrus deserves to be remembered not only as a decisive moment in history, but as proof that even the most entrenched narratives of power can be challenged and rewritten. In the steppes, where the Massagetæ once galloped, the wind still blows ceaselessly. There are no monuments to Tomyris, no city bearing her name, no empire tracing its lineage to her. Nevertheless, her story, the story of the queen who bathed Cyrus's head in the blood he so coveted, continues to echo through the centuries as a reminder of the limits of power and the terrible price of boundless ambition.